At 3 a.m. on May 2, 2026, 17,000 people lost their jobs, millions of passengers lost their flights, and the most complained about flying sky bananas in American history finally died. Spirit Airlines is gone, not restructuring, not pausing, not pivoting, gone. Liquidated, the yellow planes are silent. And honestly, the story of how this happened is one of the wildest corporate collapses in modern American history. Failed mergers, bankruptcy, twice, a war in the Middle East, a government bailout attempt that blew up at the last second, and a final ATC radio call that, I'm not gonna lie, actually got to me a little bit. Strap in, you don't need to pay extra for this seat. Before we talk about the crash, you need to understand what Spirit actually was. Most people think Spirit has been a budget airline forever. It hasn't. Spirit Airlines began its life as a Michigan trucking company. In the 1980s, it branched into charter air service. In 1992, it rebranded as Spirit Airlines and started selling commercial flights. In 1999, it moved headquarters to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which would basically become Spirit's entire personality. But here's the thing. Spirit wasn't always a mess. In the 2007, Spirit made a bet. Go ultra low cost. Strip the product to its absolute bones, charge the lowest possible base fare, then charge extra for literally everything else. Bags, seat selection, boarding order, printing your own boarding pass. They essentially invented the concept of airline fees as a business model in the United States, and for a while, it worked. Through the 2010s, Spirit was actually one of the most profitable airlines in America on a per-seat basis. They were growing, adding routes, the yellow planes were everywhere. Then 2020 happened. COVID wiped out leisure travel, Spirit's entire customer base. The losses began, and they never really stopped. Stat: by the time Spirit filed its first bankruptcy in November 2024, the company had lost more than $2.5 billion since the start of 2020. Here's where the story gets genuinely unhinged. Starting in 2022, Spirit became the most sought-after woman at the dance. 2 different airlines wanted to buy it. What followed was a corporate bidding war that should absolutely be a Netflix documentary. Act 1. Frontier shows up. February 2022. Frontier Airlines, Spirit's budget airline cousin, announces a merger deal. $6.6 billion. This would have created the 5th largest airline in the United States. Spirit's shareholders tentatively approve it. Then, JetBlue crashes the party. Act 2. In April 2022, JetBlue makes an unsolicited offer, $3.8 billion, $33.50 per share, a significant premium. Spirit plays both sides for months genuinely. They kept going back and forth like a contestant on The Bachelor, and in July 2022, Spirit dumped Frontier and accepted JetBlue's offer. Frontier goes home. Spirit shareholders celebrate. For about 18 months, everything looks fine. Act 3. The government kills it. The Biden-era Department of Justice sues to block the JetBlue merger. Their argument: Spirit keeps fares low for everyone on the routes it flies. You don't have to fly Spirit to benefit from Spirit. Remove Spirit, and Delta, American, and United will raise prices on every route Spirit used to compete on. The trial runs through October 2023, and on January 16, 2024, a federal judge sides with the DOJ. Within months, Spirit filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the first major U.S. airline to do so since 2011. Now here's the savage twist. Frontier, the airline Spirit dumped in 2022, came back in January 2025 with a new offer, $2.1 billion. Spirit's creditors rejected it as lowball. Too little, too late. Spirit chose to go it alone. Blocking the JetBlue merger was a massive mistake. Okay, so here's where the story takes a turn from corporate mismanagement to genuinely cruel twist of fate. After its first bankruptcy in late 2024, Spirit actually put together a credible restructuring plan. They cut almost 4,000 jobs. They slashed 200 underperforming routes. They furloughed flight attendants and pilots. They shrank the airline down to its strongest markets. By February 2026, a bankruptcy court had approved a plan. Spirit was supposed to emerge from Chapter 11 by early summer. Lean, focused, profitable. The plan assumed jet fuel at $2.24 a gallon. Spirit's entire restructuring plan was built around a fuel cost assumption of $2.24 per gallon for 2026. Then, on February 24, 2026, just days after Spirit announced its plan, war broke out involving Iran. The conflict disrupted tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices exploded. Jet fuel hit $4.60 a gallon. J.P. Morgan estimated that at $4.60 per gallon, Spirit's operating margin would deteriorate to negative 20%, adding $360 million to its annual costs. That was more than Spirit's entire cash balance. A plan built on $2.24 fuel does not survive $4.60 fuel. Spirit filed for bankruptcy a second time in August 2025, already unprecedented for a major carrier, and now this second restructuring was also collapsing. In desperation, Spirit went to Washington. They asked the Trump administration for $500 million in emergency funding. In exchange, the government would take up to a 90% stake in the airline. Trump, when asked about it, said, and I quote, "Well, I guess we're looking at it." Inspiring stuff.
The deal is dead. Bondholders and the government were too far apart. No bailout.
Senior managers told Spirit's operations center in Orlando just before midnight. At 3 a.m. Eastern on May 2, 2026, Spirit Airlines ceased all operations. The last Spirit flight ever, NK 1833, Detroit to Dallas-Fort Worth, touched down just after midnight. The pilot radioed the tower.
"Is there any other Spirit flight coming in after us?"
"I don't see anything, so you might be the last one. Well, it was a pleasure working with you guys. I wish you the best."
Thank you very much.
And that was it. 34 years. Done. Let's talk about something that should make every Spirit shareholder want to flip a table. While Spirit was filing for bankruptcy twice in 1 year, Delta, United, and American were all absolutely fine. More than fine. Thriving even. Check out these domestic market shares at the beginning of 2026. So what did the big guys have that Spirit didn't? Number 1. Scale and network. When Delta has 16 to 18% market share, a single fuel price shock doesn't destroy it. The diversified revenue from international routes, corporate travel, premium cabins and cargo absorbs the blow. Spirit had one product, cheap domestic leisure seats. One shock and the whole thing cracks. Number 2, loyalty programs. Delta Sky Miles, United Mileage Plus, American Advantage. These are billion-dollar standalone businesses. They generate stable, predictable revenue that has nothing to do with fuel prices. Spirit's Free Spirit program was less of that. Number 3, basic economy killed Spirit's only weapon. When Delta, American, and United introduced stripped-down basic economy fares in the mid-2010s, they took price competition directly to Spirit. Suddenly, you could fly Delta for Spirit prices, but with more legroom, more routes, and an airline that didn't charge you $45 to bring a backpack. Spirit had a 3.4% domestic market share in its final months compared to 16 to 18% each for Delta, American, Southwest, and United. It was the 9th largest airline in the US. The expert verdict? Shai Gilad, former airline pilot and Georgetown professor, put it bluntly. When you're a low-cost carrier, by definition, you're relying on having a cost advantage. And they just don't have that anymore. So here's the reality on the ground, right now, as Spirit's yellow planes sit silent on tarmacs across America. An average of 300 flights and 60,000 passengers per day were impacted just in the next month alone. People showed up at airports to find Spirit check-in desks, covered in printed notices, and staff who had only learned the airline was closing an hour before. One woman and her elderly mother arrived to catch a flight to Charlotte for a family funeral. They had no idea Spirit had closed overnight. Alexandra Marino showed up at LaGuardia thinking she was flying to Florida for Mother's Day, and only found out when strangers in line told her what happened. This is the part that doesn't trend on Twitter. Real people, real plans, real chaos. Who stepped up? The Department of Transportation coordinated an industry response. Here's what each airline did. United Airlines, $200 capped one-way rescue fares, plus dedicated Spirit employee job portal. Delta, $200 capped fares, plus reduced pricing on high-volume Spirit routes. American Airlines, $200 capped fares, and serves 70 of 72 Spirit airports, plus a Spirit jobs page. Southwest, $200 capped fares across its network for Spirit passengers. JetBlue Airways, $200 capped fares. Frontier Airlines, 50% off all base fares through May 10th. Allegiant Air, froze prices on all routes overlapping with Spirit's former network. Most major carriers also extended travel pass benefits and spare jump seats to Spirit's 17,000 displaced workers. If you still have a Spirit ticket, credit-debit purchases get automatic refunds, travel agent bookings, contact your agent, vouchers, free Spirit miles, and points? The bankruptcy court will decide. I want to be real with you for a second because the easy take is, good riddance, Spirit was awful, they charged for water, the end. And look, that's not wrong, but the full picture is more complicated. Spirit Airlines died from a combination of things that almost any airline would have struggled with. A pandemic that wiped out its entire customer base, regulatory decisions that left it stranded without a merger partner, a competitor landscape that eroded its only competitive advantage, an engine recall that grounded its fleet, and a geopolitical conflict on the other side of the world that doubled its fuel costs at the exact moment it had the least ability to absorb the shock. What Spirit didn't have and what ultimately made it fragile was margin, financial margin, network margin, strategic margin. The ultra-low-cost model works when everything goes right. When something goes wrong, there's nowhere to absorb the hit. Spirit Airlines was quietly keeping your plane tickets cheaper, even when you didn't fly Spirit. Consumer advocates say Spirit's presence suppressed fares on every route it competed on. William McGee of the American Economic Liberties Project. You do not have to fly a small carrier to benefit from its presence, because they will bring down the big guys' fares. Without Spirit flying those routes, everyone, Delta passengers, United passengers, American passengers, will pay more. The airline you love to hate was doing invisible work for your wallet. And for the workers, 17,000 people, pilots who took pay cuts to help the airline survive, flight attendants who found out their airline was closing via a 3 a.m. union message, ramp workers who, in the IAM union's words, did not cause this failure, corporate mismanagement and poor financial stewardship did. They deserved better than this outcome. Spirit Airlines flew its last flight on May 2, 2026. The controller told the final crew, "It was a pleasure working with you guys, I wish you the best." After 34 years, that was the send-off, not a merger, not a rescue, not a triumphant restructuring. It'll be interesting to see how other airlines respond to the rising fuel costs. They may raise ticket prices or bag fees, stop serving free snacks, or cancel low-performing routes. Frontier is already absorbing demand from Spirit's shutdown, expecting a 20% unit revenue boost in the second quarter. JetBlue is expanding aggressively, adding 11 new routes from Fort Lauderdale and targeting both budget-conscious and comfort-seeking travelers. This is the airline industry. Farewell, Spirit Airlines. Peace.